the playlist that undressed our alibi. It started with a song that did not belong to my life. A soft synth wash, a woman humming into a mic like she was kissing a bruise better, a snare that entered shy and then decided to own the room. I was chopping herbs in my kitchen, trying to be a domestic man with a future, when my speaker flashed the banner I had been ignoring for weeks. Friends Mix updated. The track sat at the top with a tiny thumbnail of a face I knew too well. Lena. I run growth at a music app that promises curation without creepiness. I know every hiding place the algorithm has and which ones we pretend are accidental. I also know that when a song appears at the top of your shared mix, it is not a ghost. It is evidence of someone else's late-night decision-making. I turned down the burner and replayed the opening bar. I had not added this track. My fiancée, Myra, would not have. She listens to music that sounds like architecture. This sounded like a dare written in lowercase. Lena and I met when I was building a playlist for a wine bar that wanted to be remembered for sound instead of prices. She played cello on Thursdays and worked brand for a donor-funded gallery the rest of the week. She had the kind of presence that made rooms pull their shoulders back and behave. My first night there, she stretched a note until it became an answer, and then smiled like only she had heard the question. After her set, I told her the bar should dim the lights during her cadenza. She said dim them yourself, and handed me the switch with a look that turned my insistence into permission. Myra liked Lena in the abstract way that kind women like the women who will make their lives difficult if left unattended. We cooked for her once. She brought a bottle too expensive for our table and a bouquet that made the kitchen feel like an apology. Myra told stories that landed in the right order. Lena laughed in a way that moved appointments. After she left, Myra said she is trouble said like weather, not accusation. I said we live indoors and kissed her until the forecast changed. The second time I heard the song, I was at my office pretending to fix onboarding while mostly avoiding a decision about ad inventory we had blacklisted and then quietly unblacklisted. The Friends Mix refreshed with the same thumbnail. Our app shows listening windows if you know where to look. Hers were hours that smell like citrus and regret. My cursor hovered over the three dots like a man contemplating self-harm. I clicked through to her public profile and found a new playlist called For the Drive. It was private, but the cover art betrayed her. A photo of a road somewhere that believed hills were better than deadlines. 10 songs, 8 about leaving, 2 about arriving with the lights still off. I should have shut my laptop and called Myra to tell her we were becoming people who narrate their problems early. Instead, I messaged Lena a link to a live recording of the same song and wrote this one breathes better. She replied with a 10-second voice note recorded in a bathroom that sounded like it had seen good decisions and forgave none. She hummed 2 bars and said you are impossible, and I replied then stop. She did not. The first time we crossed the line in a way the body recognizes as a border, it was after her set. She handed me her bow in the hallway, laughing at some joke about donors and the price of sincerity, and my fingers brushed hers. The air went specific. We did not make anything you could photograph. We did the kind of remembering that lives under clothes. Her mouth found the place below my ear that turns the rest of the room off. My hand mapped the slope of her waist like a man who studies terrain before he trespasses. We stopped while stopping still felt like a talent and not a sentence. I went home and stood in our doorway until Myra looked up from the proofs she was comparing and said, "Are you in this room or in one you should not be?" I said, "Here." It was true. It was also a promise about tomorrow that I was not ready to keep. The problem with music is that it turns every room into a witness. Our app had just launched a feature you could opt into with 2 taps and a blind trust in romance. Dual blend. 2 people go invisible to each other. The app mixes their week into a single living thing, and suddenly your Monday run hears her Wednesday shower. Lena and I had set ours up months back for a campaign video. I had forgotten to turn it off. Now the blend pulsed on my phone with a little heart in the corner, and a caption that no one meant to be as accusatory as it read to me. Updated daily. I went to the bar on a Thursday with a lie about a meeting still forming in my mouth. Lena played with an impatience that would have been ugly in anyone else. After, we leaned in the alley where the kitchen exhaled garlic and good choices. She said point to any window and tell me what the person behind it is listening to. I said a woman in a robe over tea, a man who thinks drums make him honest. She touched my wrist as if to ground me. I kissed her like a distraction. We stopped at the part where YouTube would cut to an ad. Then she put her forehead on my collarbone and said I am being edited by a version of myself who loves you and hates the consequences. Between us and the consequences was Nico, her donor with a conscience he liked to rent out. He wore linen like an apology and paid retainers late with charm. He had a wife whose gallery openings made people speak, as if the room might notice adjectives. When he decided a project needed saving, he wrote checks and sentences. He also took Lena on drives to a house upstate that had a piano and a porch that pretended to be honest. I knew this because our blend updated itself like a gossip. At 3 on a Saturday, it swallowed a piano concerto I had never seen in her library, a piece only available on an archive I had helped negotiate a window for. I called her. I did not ask, "Are you with him?" because my mouth respects embarrassment. I asked, "Do you want me in this story?" She said, "I want us not to be a story at all." Then she sent me a playlist called For the Porch with 4 songs about breath and one about swallowing lightning. She wrote, "Do not listen now." I listened in my kitchen, alone, the basil we were pretending to keep alive practicing failure in the corner. Myra found us with the kind of intelligence that does not require a job title. She was packing for a weekend with her sister and asked me to print the itinerary. I opened the shared drive and there it was, unmissable to a trained eye. The thin thread of my late-night listening history woven into a playlist that was not hers. She did not say anything then. She waited until the morning when I smelled like a person who had not slept and poured coffee like a confession. She said the app knows and so do I, and I said I am sorry in the voice you use for weather. She said, "Do you love her?" and I said I love the part of me she turns on. She did not cry. She drew a boundary on the table between our mugs and said 2 weeks and no elegance. Sleep elsewhere. Keep your honesty close and your metaphors far. I went to a coworker's sublet with a window that argued with a fire escape. The couch wore my lack of strategy like a cape. I built a ritual to keep from becoming a public failure. Work, run, make a meal that uses the whole lemon. Read long sentences that punish shortcuts. Fall asleep without asking anyone to applaud. Lena sent a single track at midnight with no caption. I left it unplayed and swore it would save me. It did not. I pressed play at 3 a.m., and the guitar part reminded me where her shoulder first decides to be a shoulder, and I was lost again, sitting up like a man reading his own indictment. On the 7th day, I did something unforgivable for a person who builds tools designed not to hurt anyone more than they intend to. I opened the server and I looked, not at content, at patterns. The Duo blend for our 2 accounts had an anomaly, a sync spike that did not align with our usual nights. It happened at a location tagged rural, a place with a lake that marketed itself as available for restraint. The other account logged in from there carried a device I did not recognize. Not Nico, not me, someone new, or your narrative needs to be less arrogant, I told myself. I drove without telling anyone how stupid I felt. The house sat like a good lie, modest and ready. The porch held a plant that had lived through many winters on grace. You cannot knock on a door and announce yourself as the guardian of playlists without giving up the right to dignity. I did it anyway. A man opened the door with the posture of someone who lifts things for a living and expects thanks for it. He wore a t-shirt from a festival where rich men pretend to be pioneers. I asked for Lena. He smiled the way you smile when you are proud of something you do not have the right to be proud of. He said she is sleeping. I said, do you love her? And he said, I collect outcomes. I said, I collect exits. He laughed, then let me onto the porch because men like us prefer to avoid witnesses. He said, her songs make me think I could have been a better man had someone taught me earlier. I said, then learn now. He said, do you belong here? I said no, and then left because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop pretending courage means staying. In the car, I played the first song she had ever sent me and let it end without touching replay. I texted her 4 words, no encore, no more blends. She wrote back a minute later, I know, and then I am sorry in a spelling that said she had been crying and maybe laughing at herself. Myra and I performed the ancient ritual of people who want to remain better than the worst thing about themselves. We met on a bench. We spoke like adults who had learned to put verbs in the right order. She said, I will not be your second draft, and I said, I do not deserve even your first. She said, I want boredom that does not humiliate, and I said, I want that with you if the door remains open after we stop preening. We tried. Our trying looked like eating plain food and telling the truth while it was still small. We made the bed like a promise and did not test it with theatrics. We kissed like a rehearsal we intended to perform in public without shame. When I put my mouth on the place that makes her breathe with a specific heart, she said, there you are, and I said, here. Lena played one more Thursday. I stood in the back and behaved. She closed with the song that started this and did not look for me. After the set, she walked past me with a nod that felt like a diploma. Outside, she texted, only thank you for the part of me you insisted was real. I replied, keep it. The next day, our blend went quiet. Neither of us turned it back on. We let the algorithm forget us, which I am told it will do if you give it enough time and new data to love. I kept my job by pretending to believe in our feature's kindness. To be fair, it saves more couples than it kills. People like proof of attention. People like the idea that their private taste can be a bridge. But I wrote a memo anyway, one that recommended a fail-safe for days like mine. Prompts that ask whether the mix should keep updating when one account moves to a new location. Reminders that a song can be a weapon in a house that needs quiet. The board liked the optics. We shipped it. Myra and I learned to be citizens in our small country. We clean more than we talk when we are tired. We put our phones face down after 9. We built a shelf for vinyl because objects remind you that music was not invented to be proof. It was invented to be a room. Sometimes we play records loud and dance with no coordination and kiss in ways that would bore the internet and anchor the day. On those nights, when we crawl into bed and the city keeps practicing its sirens, I open the app and ignore the places with hearts and look instead for that old public radio show with the engineer who left the breath in. I press play and Myra laughs at the sepia sound and says, your grandfather would have liked this. I say mine too and mean please stay, and she does. Last week my speaker lit up with a new Friends mix. At the top, a track from a cellist I did not recognize, recorded live in a church that forgave anyone who asked nicely. The thumbnail face was not Lena's, it was Myra's. I played it. The first note lifted the ceiling a fraction of an inch and put it back gently. The second note made me find her hand on the couch without thinking. We held on. The song ended. The room stayed. The algorithm asked whether I liked it, and for once I did not feel surveilled by the question. I tapped yes, and then said out loud what no platform will ever make easier for us, the only line that makes mornings possible. Stay.